The B-side. Chapter 1. What the Attic Kept. My mother kept everything. This was not a virtue, exactly. It was more of a compulsion. The particular hoarding instinct of a woman who had lived through rationing and knew, at the cellular level, that things you throw away have a way of being needed later. Her attic in Hebden Bridge was a museum of the life she had declined to curate. Cardboard boxes labeled in her spidery handwriting. Bin bags of fabric she had always intended to sew into something. My father's tools arranged on a pegboard as though he might return from the grave to use them. He had been gone 11 years. She had been gone 6 weeks. I had been putting off the attic for exactly that long. It was a Saturday in October when I finally climbed the pull-down stairs with a roll of bin bags and a flask of tea, wearing the old jumper I keep for jobs that involve getting filthy. My name is Elena Marsh. Elena Ruth Marsh, née Hartley. And I am 66 years old. And I had just sold the house. And had exactly 3 weekends left before the new owners wanted possession. The attic was the last room. I worked methodically for 2 hours. This is how I have always operated. Steadily, without sentimentality, 1 box at a time. It is a personality trait that served me well in 40 years of secondary school teaching, and has served me even better in the subsequent management of grief, which is, I have found, mostly a matter of keeping yourself moving. My daughter Rachel says I process by doing. She is not wrong. The box was in the far corner, half hidden beneath a roll of carpeting and a broken standard lamp. It was a shoebox. Clark's, with a sailing ship printed on the side. And it was sealed with the kind of brown parcel tape that had been old-fashioned even when it was applied, which, based on the brittleness of it, was sometime in the mid-1970s. I don't know why I didn't just put it in the bin bag. Perhaps it was the weight of it. Heavier than expected. Or the fact that my name was written on the lid in my mother's own hand, the same spidery script I'd been reading on box after box all afternoon. For Elena, when the time is right. My mother's decision about timing, apparently, had been to wait until she was no longer available to explain herself. I cut the tape with my thumbnail and opened it. Inside, wrapped in a tea towel that had been white once and was now the yellowed ivory of old linen, was a vinyl record. A single, 7-inch, in a plain white sleeve. On the label, in typewritten text, Julian Moss and the Clearwater Sound. Demo. August 1974. Not for release. And around the record, folded once and creased with age, was a letter. I sat down on a box of curtain fabric and read it. My hands were shaking before I reached the second paragraph, and by the end of the first page I was crying in a way I had not cried since my husband David died 4 years ago. The ugly, open-mouthed crying of someone who has been hit with something they were not braced for. The tea in my flask went cold. The October light shifted in the attic's small window. I sat there for a very long time. The letter was dated the 12th of August, 1974. It was written in Julian's handwriting. I knew it immediately. Though I had not seen it in over 50 years, the way you know certain things in your body before your mind catches up. Elena. I don't have much time and I'm not sure this will reach you, which is why I'm leaving it with your mom and asking her to keep it safe until I know whether I'm being paranoid or not. By now you'll be wondering where I've gone. I need you to know I didn't run from you. I could never run from you. I am running from something else entirely, something I didn't choose to see and now can't unsee. At the Meldon Fair 2 weeks ago I was in the wrong place. I saw men I shouldn't have seen with another man I recognized. Thomas Vane, the promoter. The one who's been financing half the festival circuit for the past 3 years. I won't write what I saw them doing. Because I don't want to put it down in words on paper that someone else might find. What I can tell you is that Vane knows I was there. One of his men followed me back to the van. 3 days after we got home, someone went through my flat. I'm not a brave man, Elena. I want you to know I know that. A braver man would go to the police. But the police in this part of the world have a relationship with Vane that I don't fully understand and am not willing to test. I'm going to my uncle in Canada until this quiets down. I'm going to send for you as soon as I know it's safe. The record is a copy of the demo we finished last week. It's the best thing I've ever made. I want you to have it. Because whatever happens, you should know that when I wrote those songs, I was writing about you. I love you. Please wait. Julian. I had not waited. Of course I had not waited. I had been 19 years old and he had vanished without a word, and within a year I had built a life of deliberate forward motion. University, teaching, David, Rachel, 40 years of ordinary extraordinary love. And I had not looked back. Because looking back had seemed, for a very long time, like a luxury I could not afford. My mother had kept this letter for 52 years. Had read it, presumably, and made the decision that the time was never right. I sat in her attic and tried to be angry at her and could not quite manage it, because she had loved him too, in the way that mothers love the boys their daughters love. Cautiously, generously, with a private reservation for the possibility of disappointment. She had held onto it in case Julian came back. And then, when he never did, she had held onto it because she didn't know what else to do. And then she had died, and the problem had passed to me. I took the record and the letter downstairs. I put the kettle on. I called my granddaughter. Chapter 2. The Girl Who Speaks the Internet. Lily is 22 years old and she is Rachel's daughter. And she is, in the modern sense, ferociously capable in ways I only partially understand. She works in digital marketing, which involves skills I could not describe to you with any confidence, but which appear to include the ability to find almost anyone on the planet, given 30 minutes, a laptop, and a flat white coffee. More importantly, she is the person in my life who greets problems the way other people greet gifts. She arrived at my house in Leeds on Sunday morning in a cloud of energy and a vintage denim jacket, took one look at my face, and said, "Gran. What happened?" I told her. I showed her the letter and the record. She read the letter with the focused attention she usually reserves for her phone, which meant she read it twice, very carefully, and didn't speak until she'd finished. Then she set it down and looked at me with a directness I have always loved in her. "Julian Moss," she said. "Julian Moss," I confirmed. And the Clearwater Sound. They were about to be signed when he disappeared. I found out later from the band's drummer, Jeff Rains, who I saw at a reunion for some years. He said Julian had just gone. Left everything, left the contract negotiations, left without a word to anyone. The label dropped them. The band broke up. What year did you stop looking for him? I considered this honestly. I never actively looked, I said. We didn't, in those days, the way you would now. There was no internet. No way to find someone who didn't want to be found. I wrote to his flat and got no reply, and eventually I stopped. Eventually I stopped writing. Lily nodded slowly. She had taken out her laptop and opened it with the automatic ease of someone for whom a computer is an extension of thought. "Okay," she said. "Tell me everything you remember about him. Where he grew up, where he went to school, family, anything." I told her everything. It was more than I had expected. Memory is strange that way, compressing whole years into manageable packets, but releasing specific details with startling clarity when asked directly. I remembered that Julian had grown up in Bristol, that his father had been a dock worker, that he had a younger sister named Penny. I remembered the uncle in Canada. Vancouver, I thought, or possibly Victoria. I remembered the name of the band's manager. The name of the pub in Clifton where they had their residency on Thursday nights, the label that had been courting them. I remembered his hands on the guitar strings. I remembered the particular quality of his attention when he listened to you talk. The way the rest of the room seemed to recede. I remembered that he liked strong tea, and hated football, and could name every Beatles album track in recording order, and that when he laughed, his whole face changed. I also remembered that I had spent 20 years not allowing myself to remember any of this, and that it had all been waiting, perfectly preserved, behind the door I'd kept closed. Lily typed and clicked and searched. She explained what she was doing as she did it, which I appreciated and also only half followed. Genealogy databases. Electoral rolls digitized from the 1970s and 80s. Archived music industry records, old newspaper archives. The music press coverage might be the fastest route, she said. A band about to be signed in 1974. There'd be at least some mentions in the NME or Melody Maker. Let me check what's been digitized. While she searched, I put the record on. I have a turntable. Not a hipster affectation, but a Riga that David bought in 1989 and which I have never been willing to part with. I cleaned the vinyl with the care of someone handling something irreplaceable, which it was, and lowered the needle, and Julian Moss's voice filled my living room for the first time in 52 years. He had a low, precise voice. Not a showman's voice, not the kind that filled arenas, but the kind that made you feel that he was singing directly into the particular silence of your specific life. The first song was called Clearwater. I remembered him writing it in the kitchen of his Bristol flat, trying out chord changes while I drank tea at his kitchen table and pretended to read. The second song I had never heard before. It was called Elena, and it was 4 minutes and 12 seconds long, and I sat in my armchair with the light coming through the window, and listened to a 23-year-old Julian Moss describe loving me, and I was 19 again, and 66, simultaneously. Lily looked up from her laptop. She saw my face. She didn't say anything. She simply turned back to her screen and kept working, which was exactly the right thing. Here, she said, 20 minutes later. January 1975. A small piece in the NME. Julian Moss and the Clearwater Sound, signed to Dawnlight Records, debut album expected spring 1975. She paused. But the album never came out. There's nothing after that. She clicked. Dawnlight Records was a subsidiary of. Right, Thomas Vane's Meridian Music Group. The name in the letter. I felt something cold move through me. The label he was running from, I said. The label that owned his record deal. Lily looked at me. Gran, that's not a coincidence. Chapter 3. 1974 and what it cost. I need to tell you about Julian the way he actually was, because the temptation with lost love is to sanctify it. To sand away the difficulty and keep only the luminous parts. I have resisted this, mostly, over 50 years of occasional private reckoning. He was not a saint. He was 23 years old and furiously talented and sometimes terrifying to be around, the way genuinely creative people can be when the work is going badly. Closed off, distracted, conducting an internal argument you were not invited to join. He had a temper he was ashamed of and controlled imperfectly. He was not always kind. But when he was present, he was entirely present. And the music was extraordinary. I met him in the spring of 1973 at a benefit concert in Bristol. A small venue, 30 people, raising money for the miners' strike support fund. He was performing solo, just the guitar and his voice, and I was there because my friend Sylvia had dragged me along, and I had gone because I had nothing better to do on a Thursday evening at the end of my first year of teacher training. I was 19 and I thought I was already old enough to be cynical about earnest young men with guitars. He played for 40 minutes and I completely revised this opinion. We spoke afterwards over paper cups of warm wine. He was nervous in a way that surprised me, given what he'd just done on the stage. He talked too fast and made a joke that didn't land and then laughed at himself for making it, and something about the laugh. The self-aware, undefended quality of it dismantled whatever reserve I'd brought to the conversation. We were together for just over a year. The last time I saw him was the 27th of July, 1974, on the platform at Bristol Temple Meads. He was going to the Meldon Fair, a 3-day festival on a farm near the Somerset border, that had built up a small but devoted following in the alternative circles he moved through. I was going home to my parents in Halifax for my mother's birthday weekend. He kissed me goodbye on the platform and said he'd ring when he got back, and that was the last thing. I went home. He went to the Meldon Fair. And Thomas Vane's men followed him when he left, and whatever Julian saw on that farm changed everything. I did not know, for 52 years, what he had seen. I did not know until Lily found a piece of investigative journalism published in a small Bristol magazine in 1987, 13 years after Julian disappeared. The journalist, a man named Paul Chambers, who had been digging into the Southern England festival circuit of the early 1970s, wrote about Thomas Vane and Meridian Music Group, about the money laundering that had been running through the festival finances for several years, using the notoriously cash-heavy ticket sales to clean money from sources that Chambers described carefully and with obvious awareness of libel law, and about an incident at the Meldon Fair in 1974, involving a local official and a cash handover that had apparently been witnessed by at least one person who subsequently disappeared from the music scene. Chambers didn't name Julian. He referred to him only as a musician associated with the Dawnlight label. He knew, I said. Chambers knew it was Julian and chose not to name him. Which means either he was protecting him or he knew something had happened to him, Lily said. Her voice was careful and quiet, the way it got when she was thinking hard. Gran, I need you to prepare for the possibility that this doesn't have a happy ending. I've been prepared for that for 50 years, I said. I just need to know what the ending actually is. Chambers had published in 1987 and Lily found a record of him still working. A retired journalist in his late 70s, living outside Bristol. She found his contact details in approximately 11 minutes using a combination of LinkedIn, the archived masthead of a local Bristol newspaper from 2019, and what she called a bit of creative Googling that I decided not to ask her to elaborate on. I wrote him a letter that evening. Old-fashioned, handwritten, posted first class. Lily suggested email. I felt, for reasons I could not fully articulate, but which had to do with the nature of what I was asking, and the age of the man I was asking it of, that a letter was more respectful. He rang me 4 days later. Chapter 4. What Paul Chambers Knew. His voice was old in the way that voices become old. Not weak, but quieter, as though it had learned over decades that volume is not the same as weight. I've been wondering, he said, whether anyone would ever ring about that piece. You knew his name? I said. Yes. Why didn't you print it? A long pause. Because he'd asked me not to. Because when I found him, he was building a life that would have been destroyed by the publicity, and I made a judgment call. Another pause. I hope I was right. I've wondered about it for 30 years. When Julian left Bristol in August 1974, 12 days after he'd written the letter he'd left with my mother, a letter he had presumably told himself was a precaution and not a farewell, he had not gone to his uncle in Vancouver. He had made it as far as London, where a contact in the music scene had helped him acquire, by means Chambers described with careful vagueness, a new set of documentation. He had crossed to Ireland under a different name and spent 18 months in Dublin before moving on. In 1977, using the last of the money he'd saved from touring, he had emigrated to the United States. Where? I asked. My voice was doing something I had to concentrate to control. Massachusetts, initially, Chambers said. He spent some years in Boston. He was still playing music, but quietly. Local venues, nothing that would get him noticed. He was terrified of Vane's people for years, and honestly not without reason. Vane had genuine connections. The money laundering fed into things I won't name on the telephone, but suffice to say Julian was correct that the police were unreliable. And then? He moved north eventually. Vermont, I think he said. He met a woman. A pause. I should tell you. He spoke of you. When I interviewed him in '87, I told him I'd been trying to trace the witness, and he knew immediately that meant I'd found him. He was very calm about it. He gave me what I needed for the piece on condition that I didn't name him or give his location. And when we'd finished, he asked me. He asked whether I knew what had happened to a girl called Elena Hartley from Halifax. I could not speak for a moment. I told him I didn't, Chambers said gently. Which was true. I'm sorry. He asked. I said. He asked. I looked at Lily across the kitchen table. She had been listening to my side of the conversation with her chin in her hands, and she saw my face change, and she reached across and put her hand over mine without saying anything. Mr. Chambers, I said. Is Julian Moss still alive? I honestly don't know, he said. I haven't been in contact since 1987. I have the name he was using, and I have Vermont. That's all I can give you. I'm sorry I can't do better. He gave me the name. I wrote it down. I thanked him carefully and thoroughly, the way you thank someone who has given you something they didn't have to give, and I ended the call and sat for a moment with my hand still over Lily's. Vermont, Lily said. Vermont. She was already typing. The name was Daniel Cole. Paul Chambers said Julian had picked it within a week of landing in Dublin. Chosen, he thought, more or less at random from a shop sign he'd passed, the way people do when they need a new name quickly and don't want to spend long thinking about it. There was nothing in it. It was simply the name he had been carrying for 50 years. Lily's search took 3 days. This is not, I gather, a short time in her world. She told me that she had access to subscription genealogy services that could sometimes resolve a name and approximate location within hours. But Daniel Cole in Vermont in 1987 produced too many results without additional parameters, and it was not until she thought to cross-reference with music licensing databases. Royalties still being paid, apparently, on 2 songs from the late 1970s under a pseudonym that overlapped with the right period and geography, that the picture began to clarify. The songs were registered to a D. Cole, composer, address in a small town called Craftsbury in northern Vermont. The royalties had been modest and consistent for decades. The kind of money that suggested the songs had found their way onto compilations or film soundtracks, the slow quiet income of work that outlasts its moment. The registration was last updated in 2019. We booked flights to Boston for the following Friday. Rachel, my daughter, Lily's mother, was not enthusiastic about this plan. She rang me on Wednesday evening and expressed her concerns with the precision of a woman who had spent 20 years in project management and could identify risk with professional accuracy. Mom, she said. He's 73 years old at minimum and he's been living under a false name for 50 years. He might not want to be found. He might not. I agreed. And if he's gone, Mom. If something's happened to him. You'll have flown to America to find Rachel, I said. I know. I've thought about all of it. I just don't want you to be hurt. I've been hurt, I said, gently. The hurt happened 52 years ago. What I want now is to know the shape of it. That's different. She was quiet for a moment. Then, Lily goes with you. Lily already bought her ticket, I said. We flew out of Manchester on a grey October morning, Lily and I, with a carry-on each and a photograph I'd found in another of my mother's boxes. Julian and me on the steps of the Colston Hall in Bristol, summer 1973, squinting into the sun. I am 19 in it. Thin, serious-faced, my hair in 2 long braids. He has one arm around me and he is laughing, and his whole face is changed. I kept it in my coat pocket the whole flight. Chapter 5. Craftsbury, Vermont. The drive from Burlington to Craftsbury takes about an hour through country that, in late October, was doing extraordinary things with color. The maples burning amber and red against hills that rolled northward toward Canada in the thin afternoon light. Lily drove the rental car and I looked out the window and tried to manage the particular quality of anticipatory dread that had settled in my chest somewhere over the Atlantic and had not shifted since. Craftsbury is a small town. Smaller than small, really, the kind of New England place that is mostly a general store and a white steepled church, and a scattering of houses along a road that seems to have decided not to go anywhere in particular. We arrived at 3:30 and sat in the car park of the general store while Lily consulted the address she'd written down, and I watched a man in a wax jacket load groceries into the back of a truck. It's about 2 miles up the hill, Lily said. A farmhouse. It's listed as belonging to a D. Cole. She looked at me. Gran. We can go back to the inn if you need a minute. I've had 50 years of minutes, I said. Drive up the hill. The farmhouse was a white clapboard building set back from a gravel track, surrounded by the kind of working land that speaks of deliberate, sustained care. A vegetable garden put to bed for winter. A small orchard. A woodpile that had been stacked with the precision of someone who relies on it. There was a light in the ground floor window and smoke from the chimney. A truck in the yard. I got out of the car. My legs were not entirely reliable. Lily came around and stood beside me without touching me, which was the right thing. A dog barked inside. A light shifted in the window. Someone moving toward the door. It opened. The man on the porch was 73 years old. He was not tall. Julian had never been tall. With white hair, close cropped, and the lean, weathered look of someone who has spent decades in physical work. He was wearing reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and carrying a book with one finger marking his place. He looked at us with the cautious courtesy of someone who does not get unexpected visitors. And then he looked at me. The book dropped to his side. He took off the reading glasses with a slow, careful movement, as though he were afraid of startling something. Elena, he said. Not a question. My name in his voice, after 52 years, was the most extraordinary sound I have ever heard in my life. My throat closed entirely. I could not speak. Lily, beside me, made a small involuntary sound and pressed her knuckle to her mouth. The dog was still barking somewhere inside, and the smoke went up from the chimney, and the afternoon light on the Vermont hills was the deep, golden light of a world that has decided to be beautiful at exactly the wrong moment. Julian Moss. Daniel Cole, for 50 years, but Julian Moss now in every line of his face. Came down the porch steps. He stopped 2 feet from me. He looked at me the way he used to look at me, with that quality of complete attention, as though the rest of the world had gone slightly out of focus. You found the letter, he said. My mother kept it, I said. My voice was a wreck and I didn't care. She kept it for 52 years. He nodded slowly. Something moved through his expression. Grief and relief and something I couldn't name. Something that had been held a very long time. I thought about sending word, he said. After Vane died in the 90s, I thought about. But I didn't know how. I didn't know if you'd want. Tell me everything, I said. I have all the time in the world. Tell me everything. We sat in his kitchen for 4 hours. He had married, as Paul Chambers had said, a Vermont woman named Grace, a schoolteacher, who had died of ovarian cancer in 2018. They had had 2 daughters. He showed me photographs. A life that was ordinary and particular and entirely real. A life built carefully on top of the wreckage of the one he'd had to leave. I looked at his daughters' faces and felt something complicated and true. Not jealousy, or not exactly, but the weight of the alternate version, the life that the letter and Thomas Vane had redirected. I told him about David, about Rachel, about Lily. He looked at Lily across the kitchen table and said he could see me in her, which made her laugh and me cry again, which seemed to be what I was doing now. The record, I said. I had brought it. I had wrapped it carefully and carried it in my hand luggage across the Atlantic. I set it on his kitchen table. He stared at it for a long time. He reached out and touched the plain white sleeve with one finger, the way you touch something that belongs to a time you aren't sure you're allowed to access anymore. I haven't played guitar in. He stopped. Looked up. I have one somewhere. I know, I said. I heard it on my turntable and I've been waiting 52 years to tell you it was the best thing I'd ever heard. He laughed. His whole face changed. 50 years dissolved and there he was. 23 years old, on the steps of the Colston Hall, laughing with his whole face changed. He found the guitar. A battered Martin in a case under the stairs. And he sat at the kitchen table and he played Elena, which I had listened to a dozen times in the past weeks and knew now the way you know a hymn. His voice was lower than it had been, rougher, a 50-year patina on it, but the precision was still there, the quality of meaning every word. Lily had her phone face down on the table. She did not film it. I will be grateful for this for the rest of my life. That it was just the 3 of us in that kitchen with the wood fire, and the dog and the October darkness gathering outside, and the song that had waited 5 decades to be played to the person it was written for. When he finished, the kitchen was very quiet. I'm sorry, he said. Not about the song. About everything. You wrote me a letter, I said. You told me to wait. I should have come back. You couldn't come back. No, he said. But I should have found a way to tell you I was alive. I thought about this. I had been thinking about it, off and on, for weeks. About forgiveness, which is a word that gets used with great looseness, and that I have always found deserves more precision than it usually receives. I am not a person who forgives easily. I am a person who holds things carefully and examines them and arrives, eventually, at a position. The position I had arrived at, somewhere over the North Atlantic with a vinyl record in my hand luggage, and Lily asleep in the seat beside me, was this. Julian Moss had been 23 years old and frightened. And he had made choices that a wiser or braver person might have made differently. And he had loved me, genuinely. And had asked about me in 1987 in a Bristol journalist's sitting room, and had written a song with my name on it, and kept it safe for 50 years inside a music that had cost him everything else. That was not nothing. That was, in fact, quite a lot. I know, I said. I know you should have. And I want you to know I understand why you didn't. He nodded. He was quiet for a moment, looking at the guitar in his hands. What do we do now? He asked. 73 years old, and his voice had the same quality it had in that Bristol venue in 1973. Uncertain in the way that genuine people are uncertain, asking the question he actually wanted the answer to. Now, I said, you make us something to eat, because we drove 2 hours from Burlington and we haven't had dinner, and then you tell me about your daughters. And I'll tell you about my granddaughter, who is sitting right there and found you in 3 days using what I can only describe as sorcery. And tomorrow Lily and I will come back, and you'll play me the rest of the songs from that record. He looked at Lily. She lifted her flat white coffee. She'd found a thermos in her bag, of course she had, and raised it slightly in something that might have been a toast. Deal, he said. That was 14 months ago. Julian Moss has not vanished again. He spent Christmas with Rachel and Lily and me in Leeds, sleeping in the spare room, and getting along with Rachel's husband with the surprising ease of two men who both like old films and have no patience for small talk. He met his friend Jeff Rains, the drummer, who had grown old and fat and happy in Cardiff, at a pub in Bristol in March. And I am told by several sources that this reunion produced a quantity of emotion disproportionate to the available seating. He is working on new music. He won't let me hear it yet. He says it's not ready, and I told him I have waited 52 years so he can take however long he likes, and he gave me the look that means he's trying not to laugh. The record, the demo, the 7-inch in the plain white sleeve, was authenticated by a music historian at the University of Bristol, and is apparently, within the narrow circles that care about such things, a notable artifact. There was a piece in The Guardian about Thomas Vane and Meridian Music Group, timed to coincide with a new investigation into the estate's handling of legacy royalties, and Julian's name appeared in it. His real name, his own name. For the first time in over half a century. He read it at my kitchen table with his tea going cold and said nothing for a long time and then said, "Well, there it is. There it is." I think, sometimes, about what I would have done differently if the letter had reached me in 1974 as it was intended to. I do not know the answer. I was 19 years old and I might have waited and I might not have, and the life I built without him. With David, with Rachel, with the decades of teaching and the granddaughter who speaks the internet, is not a consolation prize. It is a life. It is mine. But there is something I know now that I did not know on the October morning when I cut the tape on a Clark's shoebox in my mother's attic. I know that a 23-year-old man, running for his life in the summer of 1974, made a vinyl record and wrapped it carefully in a tea towel, and wrote beside it the most honest and frightened thing he had ever put on paper, and left it with a woman he trusted to keep it safe until the time was right. My mother kept it for 52 years. She was, in her own way, waiting for the right time, same as all of us. The needle finds the groove. The music begins. Some things are worth the wait.